Okay, everybody, I think it's more or less time to get started. It's 2:10. So I'm hoping everybody can hear me okay. It's the first time I've used this particular piece of software. So excellent. Thank you, Sarah. They can hear me. Perfect. So I'm going to get cracking now and start the presentation. And I guess in a way, I'd just like to thank Build It Right for having me back again. It's great to be back. I can't believe it's been 18 months since the first since I was there last year. So it's good to be back for a second time. I'm talking about something a little bit different today, and I hope you all enjoy it. So today I'm going to be talking about shiny new product syndrome, and that's something that we as customers have all the time. You know, actually, I've just received a couple of new gadgets myself, and I've got that shiny new product syndrome. And we're going to be talking about how brands and organizations can address that and stop it from waning after we've put all that effort into building something. We've sold it to the customer, whether you be B2C or B2B, and now what you can do to sort of help keep that excitement going. So we're going to be looking at that today. So, and we'll talk about why now is also a good time to start exceeding user and customer experiences. It's been an interesting year, to say the least, but there are, although a lot of organizations have seen a lot in the way of downturn, there is also a lot of opportunity, and we've seen transformation happening like we've never seen it before. So there are some opportunities out there, and I'm hoping that this presentation today will give you an idea of, give you some ideas anyway of what you might be able to do as an organization. So a little bit of an introduction to me. I know there are some people in the room who know me already, and hello to all of you. For those of you who don't, you'll probably notice, first of all, that I have had a bit of a lockdown growth in the hair. Usually I'm nice and short like this. It's grown a little bit. So this is me. And I am an experienced strategist and consultant. So what I do is I work with a range of organizations, from startups right through to global companies, who are looking to embed experience design and strategy into their core business disciplines. So what I would like to see, and I guess my goal is that we would start to see experience design, and whether that's user experience or customer experience or service design or all three, along there with marketing and sales, for example, and business analysis, as a tool by which to grow businesses and grow them sustainably. When I'm not doing that, actually, this was live last year, back in April last year at the first Build It Right conference, and this year has been no different in a way. I've still been doing some speaking, albeit like this, and when I'm not doing that, I'm mentoring. Usually do a lot of mentoring for Northumbria University and with Generator and RTC as well, who some of you will know. And maybe the more eagle-eyed of you will have seen behind me here, I have my Lego architecture buildings collection. And I like to spend my time off, not that I have much of it, doing a little bit of this, walking my three labradoodles, being a bit of a geek around this guy called Frank Lloyd Wright, if some of you know of him, architect. And on a Sunday afternoon when it's on, I love watching a bit of Formula One. So that's just a little bit about me, about what I do when I'm UXing and when I'm not UXing. So anyway, right, onto today's presentation. So the shiny new product. Now, I just want to make it clear before we go any further that when I'm talking about product, I'm talking about whatever it is that you create as an organization. Now, that could well be an app or a website, for example, for a client. It might be a physical product. And on the other hand, it could be a soft piece of software. So when I say product, it could mean any of those things and more. And of course, this presentation is also for those of you who provide services as well. So I want you just to we're not just talking about physical products, we're talking about whatever it means to you as an organization. So what is Ominchannel? Well, it's a cross-channel content strategy. that organizations use to improve their user experience and drive better relationships with their audience across points of contact. And that's the really important thing to remember about Omnichannel. It's across points of contact which are integrated rather than 2 points of contact. So if we go a little bit further into this and about what Omnichannel means, well, let's look at multi-channel to start off with. Well, multi-channel actually, if you imagine your customer is in the middle and they have access to potentially, you may have a physical store, you might have an office that people come to, you have a website, you send out marketing emails, you have an application, for example, or you use printed materials. You're doing all those things, but you're doing them in isolation from each other. So basically, if you can imagine what the channels are doing is it's giving customers or users an ability to buy your products, but in kind of separate opportunities. So those different opportunities or those different channels aren't siloed, they're not integrated. So that's what multi-channel is. And there are many organizations out there now that use multi-channel very successfully. And sell very successfully through their website or through a physical store or through email marketing. What they're not doing, however, is this, which is omnichannel, and that is actually integrating all those things. So you'll notice the difference in the slides there are, rather than these different aspects and these different platforms being isolated, we're now seeing that they are joined together, they are unified. And that then starts to create, rather than the customer having to go to a channel to purchase something or to get an experience of a brand, they are now able to experience it across the channels that they are on. So what we're seeing now is potentially apps now working together very well with email marketing, working together with websites, working together with customer support. And what we're doing by doing that is we're putting the customer at the very, very heart of the experience. So rather than the product and the customer having to come to the product wherever it is, we are driving product and brand information to them by understanding, one, who they are, and secondly, where they hang out. So that's the difference between, and of course the term omni, by the way, means all, multi obviously many. So that's the difference between the two. There's my little circle there. So if you can imagine, what we're wanting to do here is traditionally, and I'm talking very traditionally now, we would have potentially a sales team on one side of the brick wall. We'll have a marketing team on another side of the brick wall, maybe siloed, not much actually happening between the two. But then what we want to do with omnichannel is we're trying to bring internal departments together to take away those barriers, to enable them to start thinking more omnichannel and less multi-channel. So if you can imagine here, let's say, for example, this is a scene from inside a Starbucks cafe. It only lasts a few seconds, so it will come to a stop any minute now. But Starbucks have actually done omni-channel very, very well indeed. So you could be sitting inside a Starbucks cafe, when we're allowed to, of course. And while you're in there, if you happen to have the Starbucks app downloaded onto your phone, you may actually receive a notification from that cafe saying, thanks so much for purchasing your product. Please come back and we'll top it up for free, for example. So what they're doing there is they're combining the fact that they know you're in their premises, so in their bricks and mortar, with the fact their app. So they know what you're accessing, they know when you're accessing it, and know where you are. So they're able to upsell in a very, very clever way. So that's just a very simple idea that, we know you're in our store. Let's use the fact that we know you've downloaded our app to be able to send you messages while you're actually here. Why not come back up and get a top up on your latte for half price or something, for example. Very, very high level example, but you know what I mean. I just want to sort of talk about very briefly why this is actually starting to happen now. So why Omnichannel is more important than ever. Well, in the last 100 years or so, we've seen, basically industry was kind of, and manufacturing led the way, sort of in the early 1900s, 1920s. Then we moved on to the ability to be able to move products from place to place. And then we moved into the age of sort of communication when we were headed into the 80s and 90s. The difference of where we are now, the age of industry and the age of the customer, is you can see it quite clearly on the left-hand side of the screen here, is that the institutions, the shops, the organizations were always the one that held the key. They were the ones that held the power. The information about products, about products, the actual products, you had to go to them to get it. If you wanted a particular product, you pay the price, you go to the location they are, all right? And the customers, really, that was our only choice. When we sort of moved into the 80s and probably really now the late 90s, actually, we started to see a shift. And the shift is now seeing the customer very much in charge. And actually, it's really from 2010-ish onwards that this has accelerated hugely. So now actually what we're seeing is the customer now holding the key. They now have more choice than ever. And that means it's really important that after we've spent all that time and those resources building our product, whatever that might mean to you, is that we need now to ensure that once we've sold to our customer, that we keep them on side. We keep that product and our brand shiny to them. So we keep giving them that kind of feel-good feel. So we tend as businesses to put a lot of work up front into what we do, and we kind of think, we'll worry about the rest later. We'll worry about the customer care. We'll worry about re-engaging with our users and our customers at some point down the line when we've got time. Well, actually, no, we need to be thinking about that before we start building our product. That's really, really important, because now, as you can see on here, the pivot has tipped. And actually, rather than the institutions, organizations, companies saying to the customer, you need to come to us, now the customer is saying to those, you now need to come to me. Because if you don't come to me and you don't keep that product shiny and you don't keep me engaged, I'm going to hop off and go somewhere else, because I now do have a choice in price. I do have a choice of experience, and I don't have to come to your physical store to buy anymore. So it's so, so important that we think about this from the outset. So back in 2014, Forrester wrote a really interesting report, and here's just a very swift quote from that report. And it said, basically, by 2020, customer experience will overtake price and product as the key brand differentiator when making consumer choices. Now, I just want to make something quite clear here, that this does apply B2B as well as B2C. So all the people in the room who are B2B, I want you to stick with this, because this is just as important for you. In fact, we are now starting to see more and more B2B sort of experience, people buying, such as procurement managers, for example, expecting a similar experience as they have when they're at home buying a pair of jeans, for example. So it's really, really important. Now, I just want to obviously, make it clear to you that we are now in 2020, and we have had a different 2020 to that we expected. But there have been a few things that have happened. We have seen transformation, digital transformation, probably in the space of weeks. For some organizations, they have had to transform in that time more than they have done in the previous 10 years. That's kind of the level of transformation we've seen. And customers are, because of the way that the buying has changed, certainly in the last 9-10 months or so, they're now looking for experiences. So for example, I'm just going to throw a high level one out there. Last week, I ran out of dog food. You can see beforehand on the slide, I got 3 hungry dogs. And I was, crikey, this is Sunday night. What am I going to do? So actually, I went onto Amazon. I could have got my dog food there. for £25 a bag, but they couldn't get it to me actually until Tuesday, and I needed it for Monday. So I went online, I went onto the Pets at Home website. I paid about £6 more per bag, but I did it because they could get the food to me by Monday, and that was what I needed it for. So actually, the fact that my overall experience, including that delivery, that post-purchase experience is going to be better. So that's why I chose to pay more over the cheaper product. So this is just a little bit of an example there about what I'm talking about. And of course, so what we need to do now as companies is we have to prioritize, and we've got to prioritize seamless, interactive, and enjoyable customer experiences. Yes, before they get to us, so in that awareness, in that stage, and in that evaluation stage of a customer journey. But we also need to think about, yes, the purchase, but how can we keep people coming back to us afterwards as well? And as I mentioned, we have seen an immense change in consumer behaviour this year. Obviously, for the majority of the year, we've been at home and we've been buying from home at levels really never seen before. And we've seen existing trends such as online delivery, social shopping. And when I say social shopping, I don't mean with other people. I mean from social platforms such as Instagram, for example, and delivery increasing as much as in 8 weeks, as much as we've seen in the previous 10 years. And that's a huge change for this year. So like you can see in the image here, we can be sitting in bed with our dressing gown on and a towel on our head, and we can ensure that we get our dog food for 10 a.m. in the next morning. And this actually is a really interesting infographic from McKinsey as well. And actually what it's showing is this is some of the trends that we've seen this year. And we have seen a decline in consumption in some things, such, for example, international travel. We've seen a shake-up of preferences. It's actually quite interesting, for example, on this here, that what we were doing beforehand, where we were maybe going to the supermarket to do a food shop, every couple of days, we had kind of moved away from the big 1 week shop to doing lots of little shops. Now we, with COVID, have started doing less little shops, and we're going back to one big shop again. So we are spending less time around people. It's quite sad in a way, but that's actually what's been happening. But what is very interesting is this digital acceleration, which is the bottom line here. And yes, we have seen a preference for digital entertainment. The reason that they put that as probably temporary, this is not talking about sort of Netflix and things, but obviously we haven't been able to go to theatres, we haven't been able to see live music. And I, for one, have discovered lots of different great entertainment that I certainly wouldn't have done if we hadn't been in lockdown. But on the right-hand side of this, you'll see enduring, and that's really interesting. We are likely to see remote working to a certain extent staying with us for an awfully long time. I personally would like to see a hybrid of remote and in the office. We have seen a surge in e-commerce, which I suppose isn't very surprising, and fitness on demand at scale, which is really interesting, along with obviously e-pharmacy, e-doctor, for example. So what we need to take notice of there is the remote working, obviously, in the surge in e-commerce, I think, for most people in this room today, because this is here to stay. And we are, as I say, we've kind of had to transform very quickly, but now we're sort of we're kind of at this next level we're going to be seeing it for some time to come. So we are going to see continued digital innovation. That is absolutely for certain. Now, let's have a look at some of this. And this was happening well before COVID, of course. But in the last couple of years, if anybody has taken a trip to McDonald's, you'll start to see more of this kind of thing, not just in McDonald's, but in other restaurants, for example, where we have this kind of semi-automated ordering. So when you now come into the restaurant, you don't go to the counter straight away. You can actually do most of your ordering through here, through this semi-automated device, and you pick up your number and you go to your table, and then a person brings it to you. I think we're going to see more of this going forward as certainly restaurants and hospitals who've been massively hit by the COVID crisis, maybe going down this route. It might look slightly differently. Obviously, this is kind of mass catering from McDonald's, but I can even see some of the sort of smaller restaurant chains going down this route. I think as a sort of an innovative idea, we're going to now move into maybe even using things like biometrics, which will be very, very interesting, which is what airports are now starting to use to minimize the amount of touch that we have with technology. So this is just kind of the start, I think, what we've been seeing already. We'll see more of this as well, online ordering via apps. So, order from your home, jump in the car, and it'll be ready for you when you get there. I know Costa are doing that already. You can pick up and order through your app. And of course, they can then engage with you after you've purchased that coffee. That's the really, really important bit. You can check your points. You can maybe use them to spend on other things. And what's really interesting as well is like this, the Starbucks one again here, is that they can actually, show you the way to the restaurant and the quickest way to the restaurant. So, it's all starting to sort of kind of come together. And this is really sort of the beginning of as Omnichannel as we see it. So this is a really great example of Omnichannel, and this is Amazon. So hopefully you can see this going on the right-hand side here. I went into an Amazon Go store for the first time last year. We were in Chicago and happened to be walking past, and my husband's like, we've got to try this. And it was the most bizarre experience. You walk into the store, you scan your Amazon app, as you're going through the turnstile. I think it shows you that maybe in a second, actually, of somebody doing exactly that. Oh, here we go. And yeah, you've got your QR code. You walk in, you pop stuff into your bag or your basket. You can even pick things up off the shelf and think, oh, you know what, actually, I'm not really sure about that. I think like this next lady does now. And it knows what you're picking up off the shelf, what you've decided not to pick up off the shelf. It is very, very clever. And of course, because you're doing all this through their app, they can then send you personalized offers and experiences after the fact. It is really, really clever stuff. It is very odd, though. I would just like to give you a caveat when you just walk out, because when you just walk out, you really feel like you're shoplifting, and you're not. But it's very, very strange. We kind of stood there for a while and thought somebody's going to run after us here, but they didn't, which was great. But there you can see the app and how that works, and you can see how you've been charged. And of course, Amazon have all this information about you, even if you just go onto their website and you're logged in. It's crazy. They use your name at least 3 or 4 times just on your homepage. They make it feel like it's your place to come. One of the other things that we're going to see as well is better search experience. So things like using natural language processing is going to be key. When people go onto websites or go onto an app and they're searching for something in particular, give them, build something from the outright which will allow them to do that. So using natural language processing, for example, error tolerance is another one that you should be looking at. For example, if somebody puts in the term yellow, or looking for, I don't know, a yellow golf ball, for example, if they then should put in the term yellow as in YELOW, it's a mistake, for example, it will still know that it is returning. It knows that actually the user means yellow. And also with natural language processing, as somebody starts putting in a search term, it already starts, the system or the software already starts to return, products that are the user is probably going to be looking for. So it's very, very clever stuff. And that is definitely something that we need to see more of. So if you're building something sort of software-based or website-based, or something that requires a user to be able to search, do think about that right from the outset. Shipping recommendations, again, based on location, we need to see more of that, and we will do, depending on where somebody is and how you can get the product or service to them quickly. Location-based targeting. So for example, if somebody has downloaded a retail app, for example, it might know, for example, you're in Eldon Square or you're in the Metro Centre, and it will say, we see that you're near our store, we'd like to offer you 10% off our products today. Great way of getting to people. Image search, I guess I could probably tie that in with search overall. Just making images easier to search is better in using the right tags, for example. Augmented reality within technology is also something that we will see exponentially rising in the next 2 to 3 years, I'm sure. And I'll show you an example of that from a company called Sephora in a second. And now, of course, as I've just showed you, we're kind of going above digital here. We've now got this Amazon Go, we've got this blending of the physical experience, the experience we get from an application and our phones. And the VR mirror, that's something I'll show you again, and models as well. So if you want to see what a particular piece of clothing might look like on somebody, the fact that you can maybe hold your phone up to a piece of clothing and it will show you what it looks like on a person rather than just hanging on a hanger. So this is really all really exciting stuff, and we'll be seeing more of it. So I guess in a way questions might be, well, what are the benefits to business? Well, hopefully you already have an idea of what the benefits might be to your organization, but we're certainly, you should see increased return on investment from even the simplest of omni-channel approaches. So that might be, for example, starting to sell through social channels, being able to get to people wherever they are via their phone. That might just be the simplest approach you can take, but you would most likely see an increased ROI from that. And also, and this is really important, of course, increased customer retention. We all know that it costs less to retain a customer than it does to bring a new customer on or to onboard a customer. So the more that we can do that, we can keep customers and stop them from leaving us or leaving our brand, the better. It does obviously offer more channels for customer purchase as we start to explore what we could do. And those of you who are in the room that know me will know I'm very, very data driven. And the more data we have, the better, but only if it's being used to create customer or user insights. So I have worked with organizations before who have collected loads and loads of data, but just don't do anything with it. And it's really key that once you start building an omni-channel experience, that you start to build a picture of which platforms are driving customers to your brand, and how they're getting there and how the customers or users are moving through that particular piece of software. So it's really, really important that you not only collect data, but you use it to create insights as well. You should see a decrease in marketing costs, leveraging a relationship with customers, of course, which I guess we've talked about in a way. It's been able to give them things like that personal experience. And also it minimizes the risk of using one channel or using those channels in silos. And you'll notice here that you may have seen on the news that Primark or Primark, however you want to say it, they actually they suffered greatly during lockdown 1 and potentially are at the moment too, as non-essential shops were forced to close. The reason being that actually they do not have an e-commerce offering. They rely almost entirely on people coming to their stores, to their physical stores. And so when lockdown takes place, that causes a huge problem, and they've seen massive losses, and there are now going to be obviously a knock-on effect to their suppliers because they are shut. They're basically going to be shut for, well, what we know is going to be at least 2 months of this year. And one of them, which we are in now, of course, is the run up to probably the busiest period, well, definitely the busiest period of the year. So one of the benefits is definitely of omni-channel is building something out which ensures that you kind of haven't got all your eggs in one basket. And of course, the benefits to customers are as well, because remember, they're who we need in all this, is that they get a more streamlined purchase experience. Their post-purchase engagement with us is more fruitful, it's more meaningful, it maybe is more educational. They get offers and content that is designed just for them. And also we gain that kind of familiarity with that brand in person and online as well. So, and of course, there's the convenience of being able to, sit in bed with a towel on your head and be able to order your dog food, no matter where you are. So when I talk about device, I talk about, are you on a phone, a laptop, an iPad, whatever that might look like, the channel that you are purchasing or experience a brand on, and also the environment in which you are. So those three things are so important to think about. And I just want to show you here very briefly, this is a 20-second video. H&M, the clothing store, the clothing brand, have doing omnichannel, I should say, really, really well right now. And even if you are not an H&M shopper, do try just downloading the H&M app. Next time you think you might be about to go into a store. It is very, very clever. And I just want to show you this very quick video on how they are doing that. Okay, so very swift, I know, but it's a really, really great idea. And actually, I was in H&M just before lockdown started last week, getting a new winter coat, I think it was, and I did exactly that. And obviously, the as you can imagine, the red dresses of the coats didn't pop up into the ceiling, although I'm not sure if it's going to be that long before they do. But, the idea was I could scan a tag on the coat because they didn't have it in my size, and I could see whether they had that in store or not, for example. Just really, really clever stuff. And again, so I'm in a physical store, but I'm also engaging with that brand online as well. Really, really clever stuff. And this here is from Sephora. And Sephora, I'm hoping that you can hear me as well as this. I'm just going to pause it for a second, actually, here. Sephora are a makeup brand. They're mostly North American, and they actually came up with a tool which allowed people to try makeup on before they actually went to the store or before they actually purchased online through using a sort of virtual reality mirror. Really, really great fun. They actually have this, Mary Beth Lawton, who this quote is from, that every digital product or tool or experience that we introduce is done to make shopping for our customer more fun and more efficient. And she is the VP of Omnichannel Experience. And don't be surprised if you start to see more of that as we go along, that more people sort of taking on this omnichannel role, because it's going to become so, so important. I'm not going to play the whole video, but I'm just going to give you an idea of what you can expect if you were to use the Sephora app. So as you can see, there's this great stuff. You can just take a picture, you can look into the screen, you can try stuff on before you then go and add it to your basket. Now, those of you who are thinking, well, how does that then relate to what happens in store? Because yes, Sephora do have physical stores. Well, actually, they have VR mirrors in store as well. So maybe the ladies in the room who may have in the past gone to, say, I don't know, something like Boots and sat at one of those cosmetic tables and sort of said, oh, let's try some makeup on, and then you're sitting there for ages with your cotton wool taking it off. That's now no more at something like Sephora. What they're doing is they are saying, okay, rather than us actually putting it on you, look into the mirror here. They've got something like, they've got thousands of shades of lipsticks and eyeshadows and things, and you could just try them all on in store virtually. It's really, really clever. So yeah, so that's an example of how that's happening. So I talked about social shopping earlier. This is an example here of a store that's doing really well on Instagram. And as you can see here, the various screens, you can look at a jacket or a model wearing a jacket. And then you can actually check out. And rather than this happening, or a user seeing the jacket on Instagram and then having to come out, like in the multi-channel approach, and then maybe go to a website, it's actually enabled it so they're using Instagram to allow the shopper. So they don't even have to leave the platform. They can purchase it through Instagram rather than having to go to a separate platform to do so. So just to kind of start finishing off here, because I'm realizing it's nearly 2:45, what's going to happen with Omnichannel post-COVID? Well, I think you've probably got an idea here that we're just really at the beginning of a really steep curve. We're going to see lots more of this because COVID-19 has made this clear, is that confinement has changed consumer behaviour. And although we are going to see people, some users and some customers reverting to going back purely to physical stores because that's what they feel comfortable with, in the majority, I think we're not. I think this is just driven online to levels that we haven't seen before. So we are going to see more in the way of unified, agile e-commerce systems and processes. We are going to see more customers who want that blended approach to their shopping experiences, just like that Sephora and H&M example I've shown you. Offline shopping experiences are going to be linked to social interactions, meals out, even just getting a coffee or a trip to the cinema. Differentiation is going to be key. The buying experience now, if you can create something, or you can build something which differentiates from your competitors, the better. And of course, customers are going to be hunting out those experiences. That's what they want now. We can't get that experience at the moment that we want. They're going to try and find somewhere that's as close as possible. And remember now, we are now in 2020 and we have been in an accelerated 2020. So it's really important that that experience along with product and price is right up there. Now, yes, there are cons, and I haven't really talked about that, but very, very briefly, yes, it does cost, and there is an upfront cost to Omnichannel. Obviously, if you are working in an organization which is siloed in its approach to marketing and content creation, then yes, there's going to be some resource that you will need to put into updating, potentially transforming and purchasing. And also that, you know, if you are in an organization with kind of conflicting priorities, you know, sales might have a different priority to the developers, who have a different priority to UX, who have a different priority to something else, then yes, it will remain a key challenge for you. So there is a tad of kind of organizational change that needs to happen to enable this to happen really well. And of course, don't alienate customers. What we don't want to do with Omnichannel is bombard them. We have to get the balance absolutely right. So yeah, now is the time to get started with Omnichannel. In fact, now is probably as good a time as any. And it's interesting that those companies with a sound Omnichannel strategy do tend to retain 89% of their customers, which is quite astonishing, really. So what do you need to do? You need to ensure that you know your customers. We have 95% of companies who do not actually know who their customers are. If you don't, that is an absolute must and must be the first thing on your list before you start putting resources into developing or building anything. Get to know them. Understand what their problems are. Understand what they want you to solve the problem and to make their experience better. Plan your customer journey from that very first awareness point through to how they evaluate your organization with a competitor, through to purchase, through to post-purchase engagement, through to advocacy. Ensure each and every one of the interactions that you have with your customers and your users are fantastic and excel at and exceed their experiences. Focus on the channels that drive and excite customers and integrate them smartly. And that's why I talked about data. You have to collect data. If you don't know where they are and which channels are working, then you can't, there is no strategy and there are no insights. And again, you know, I'm talking to those people who not necessarily have a store, but potentially have an office. Don't forget the experience that people have when they actually are inside an environment. And that is so, so important, and maybe one that we tend to forget about because we've been putting so much into digital. We will come back and people will be allowed to move around again, and they will be going into stores and into offices again. Of that, I have no doubt. So really, really important to think about that. And just lastly, something to talk about here about service design. And that's really what goes on underneath the surface. Consider your processes, consider what happens behind the scenes to ensure that your customers and users have the best experience ever. And as people go through that, that user journey that I talked about there, just ensure that each and every one of those processes is brilliant. So, keep your product and how can you keep your product and service shiny? Well, you know, as competition becomes fiercer, and it will, keep your customers engaged, not with just your product, but with your brand. Be agile, be prepared to change quickly but smartly. Look for opportunities to add to the long-term experience. So don't just think build, think further forward than that. And lastly, understand your customer. You cannot do any of this without understanding who they are. So I would like to thank you very, very much for your time today. I know it's been a really busy day for some of you. You are very welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. I am Helena J. Hill, and on Twitter, I am Helena Hill UXCX. I hope that's been useful for everybody today, and I think you'll be going back into a networking session after this. And yeah, that is lovely to see everybody. I've just come back onto this the chat screen, and thank you very much. It's lovely to see some names that I that I recognise in there. And enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.